uh, oh gosh, Larry Flint.
Okay.
Yeah. Somehow that's equivalent.
Yeah, let me ask them this, if I may. Okay. First of all, the Crusades were largely a response to radical Islam, and we are seeing today. I'm not justifying the Crusades, but I am saying we are seeing today that people, even in Europe and everywhere, are seeing the extreme nature of the threat, and that it's going to take extreme measures to counter it. But let me ask this, okay? There are extremists in every group of faith, and yet more people are killed in the name of Islam than all other religions combined by far. So just blaming Islam's extremists makes no sense when everyone else's extremists combined don't cause anything resembling this kind of worldwide slaughter. So put it this way, if extremist Christians were killing at even 1/10 this pace, what would we do? You know, I mean, I get a little fired up.
We excommunicate our extremists. Westboro Baptist is not representative of anything, and they are excommunicated and excoriated and defended against anytime they want to show up. And the worst
they don't even kill people.
The worst they even do is picket funerals.
Let me tell you something, guys. If Christians were killing at even 1/10 the incredible pace that Muslims are, I would, number one, dedicate myself to finding and stopping all of them at all costs. I'd root them out. I wouldn't just say they're bad. I'd root them out. I would dedicate myself to protecting society from them. Number two, I would insist that all immigration, including student visas for Christians, stop until the problem is fixed. I would insist on it. And number three, I would insist that Christians be profiled and watched, in our places of worship, watched more closely. I would insist on these things. And that's what I tell people when they try to say, oh, it's just the extremists, it's the Muslim extremists. I say, you're right. It is just the Muslim extremists. You're right. The other ones aren't killing. I'm with you. I take the wind out of their sails with that. But then I say, how come their extremists are killing more than everybody else's combined? We all have extremists in every faith. How come nobody else's are killing at anywhere near this faith? And how come they're not doing anything about it? How come all I see is a march somewhere in France? Look, why is this all I see? What are you guys going to do about your extremists? What are they going to do about theirs? And why don't you in the media quit trying to equivocate, quit trying to equate us to them?
Well, I mean, when you think about it, it kind of makes sense because the left treats their extremists much the same way that they treat the Islamic extremists. They don't really call out the Billairs and the Bernardine Dorn and the, they aren't exactly the harshest critics of their own extremists and have not tried to
they rehabilitate their extremists.
Rehabilitate, yes, that's exactly what it is. It's not really shocking to me when it comes to the left. Another way that moral equivalency and all of that ridiculousness comes into play is that they also say that, oh, well, Muslims, these extremists, they kill Muslims more than they kill anybody else. So that's another line that they go with, and it's just absolutely appalling that they think that that's even an excuse. Because
okay, well, are we supposed to be okay with that? Because killing Muslims, who cares?
Yes, because the rest of us on the planet, we are all collateral damage.
But the thing is, I don't want the extremists to kill Muslims either.
Thank you.
I don't want the extremists to kill anyone.
Yes, period. It's not... Killing is bad, okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. Killing is bad. It's bad to kill, okay?
The point I made this week was that if you value your feelings and you think more than human life, and that you think being offended or causing offense is a capital offense, you don't belong on this planet. And I'm going to do, and I think we ought all to do, everything we can to put you out of civilized society, hunt you down, and remove you from where you can do any more damage.
Well, let me ask this, Fishy. At this point, with what they're seeing around the world, the fact, that they've had immigration go in and the Muslim communities are having kids at 4 times the pace of the other, this growing problem. And you can say, well, it's only the extremists. Yeah, but there's no way to weed them out. You don't know where the extremists are and where the people are who are helping them and so forth. At this pace, at this point, are a lot of people starting to come to the point of understanding the only way to deal with radical Islam is to remove it from the food chain completely?
Well, that gets into all the hows and wherefores, and that's not what we're here to talk about. But yes, absolutely, people who think that, their feelings are more important than other people's lives. Yes, those are people you remove from society, whether they're Islamic, whether they're, a gang member, whether they're a government official, you take them out of circulation.
No, of course, I agree. Anybody who would do that, of course, not just radical Islam. I only mention them because they're the topic.
Well, and here my question is, how do we thread this needle in the world of short attention spans and sound bites and memes? We understand that radical Islam is the, quote, tiny percentage, but, given the numbers, it's about 10% of the Muslim population is the radicals who would in fact take up arms, and then there's another 10 to 20% that would support them, and they're very well funded, and the numbers are enough to be a very significant threat to the world, and they are a threat to Western civilization, and we need to recognize that. How do we, as conservatives out there in the political realm, sharing these stories and trying to convince others to join the conservative movement, how do we express that this is the important battle that we need to be fighting, and that the left seems to want to deny the battle's existence? And we have to tell people what it is, and we have to recognize it as having its roots in the religion of Islam without it being a religious war seen as conservatives hate Muslims. How do we do that? How do we message it?
That's a really good question. I think part of the issue is we are seeing that our own media is not amplifying the voices that they say are out there in great numbers of people who are moderate, less extreme, whatever you want to say, people who are disgusted by this display in Paris and the things that were carried on in the name of Islam. If our media isn't amplifying those voices, and then they're turning around and saying, well, the American people or the West is just focused on these tragedies and not listening to the voices, why aren't they putting those voices out there?
I see Zuhdi Jasser on Fox News all the time, but I don't think that he gets on NBC, MSNBC, or CNN. They end up calling the guys from CARE to give the Islamic perspective, rather than people like Zuhdi Jasser, who talks about political Islam and that it has to be rooted out from the side of Islam.
Mm-hmm.
He's the guy who should be the voice.
How much coverage did Al-Sisi's comments
God, no kidding.
get from Egypt? He's the guy in charge over there.
Go ahead and summarize that if you can.
Well, no, I mean, he basically just came out and said what you just said, that political Islam, that there needs to be a moderation here, that we cannot tolerate this attack on free speech. This cannot stand. Things have to change.
This was on New Year's Day. The president of Egypt said this. And he was saying it very publicly, and he was saying it to the imams in Egypt, that Islam needs to be reformed and that Islam can't be controlled by the radicals. This guy stood there and said it.
Yeah,
we should be proclaiming him to all corners.
And he's lived almost 2 weeks since then. Look at that.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. That is a sad statement,
those are the things we want moderate Muslims to say. And we want his voice to be amplified, and my God, nobody's talking about it.
I can't remember where I saw this, but there was an article from, and I'll find it by the time we get the show posted and the links up. I will have found it. But there was an article about a guy saying, I think it was in Reason, perhaps it was talking about no, Islam doesn't indeed say that depicting the prophet is blasphemy. No, indeed, it doesn't command them to kill all unbelievers. Okay, that is one of the problems with dealing with Islam as a whole, is because we don't have consistent information coming out of different, all the different groups. Obviously, Christians are split denominationally, but there are some fundamentals that they agree on. Islam tends to operate the same way. The stakes are just a heck of a lot higher in the disagreements in Islam. And there is no definitive answer of what Islam is, because even if indeed 80 or 90% of people practiced it in the way that we understand religion ought to be practiced, that 10% is going to still do the things they're doing, say the things they're saying, and reflect on so many of the other people who don't follow that. And parsing it out and trying to understand, anything such as true Islam is sort of a lost cause. And you also don't want to preemptively be spying on people simply because they belong to a particular religion, or investigating folks. You want to focus on behavior, just the same way you would want us to be under suspicion from NSA based on what we do, not necessarily the fact that we're breathing like they do now. You want some probable cause in there. I don't know how you fix that. I don't know how you square that circle. But with so many different versions of stories coming out about what Islam is and is not, there's no way to trust it for a Westerner anyway, because anybody can say anything about what it does in fact mean or not mean, and we just don't know. We don't, because it's not a consistent thing between people who believe one way and people who believe another. It just so happens that people who believe one particular way are doing all the killing.
Well, and I think in large part it doesn't matter what people believe or what they think. I mean, in our nation that is under the rule of law, we don't really need to know what you think or what we believe. We only need to know how you act, because that's the only thing that is of importance in the law. And particularly with the perpetrators of the events in Paris, those individuals were known to French law enforcement, and in fact were known to American law enforcement because they had been in training in Syria. They had been in prison before for trying to do evil things. They were on the no-fly list. They were, every single one of them, all four of the people that we're talking about, were known to our national security apparatus as well as France's national security apparatus. But they weren't being watched as closely as they could have been or as they should have been, I think in large part because of the national and international denial of Islamic radicals as the source of terror. I mean, I don't know what it is, but when it comes down to it, most of the terrorism that we've seen and that we've had has come from people that have been known to the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, people that have they're people that have been watched. It's not all of a sudden, oh my God, all of a sudden Felicia Cravens went crazy and she's somebody who's never even had a parking ticket. That isn't the way it happens. It's people that we know have been, in training and that kind of thing. And I think if somebody is known to have gone over to Syria for radicalism training, sure, your passport is such and your family lives here and you're an American citizen, sure, you can come back, but we're going to watch you like a hawk.
Remember that she's a member of the Tea Party, a well-known terrorist organization. So
racist, homophobe, sexist, bigoted, white, privileged. Am I forgetting something? Texan. Texas privilege.
Texan,
yes.
Yeah. Plus, aren't you like related to the founders or something like that? You can trace back you're just such an elitist.
Yes, DAR totes.
Ugh, terrible.
Leslie, wouldn't one of the real problems simply be the numbers? We can say, well, they were known. Problem is, for everyone that is known and then does something, there's 100 who are known and don't. There are such enormous numbers of Muslims.
It's true.
Who are known to have connections, who are known to be possibly dangerous, because it is such an incredibly dangerous and connected religion. And
it's true.
I mean, when